You gave birth to them, so raise them. The husband withdrew all the money from the card and paid off his parents' loan, leaving his wife with 3 children without any money to live on. But in the evening, the mother-in-law entered the house with some papers and a slight smirk on her face. And before we continue, please write in the comments where you're from and how old you are. Okay, let's enjoy listening. Emily stirred her cooled tea with a spoon, gazing out the window. Outside, a fine autumn rain drizzled, mirroring her mood. The room, cluttered with children's toys and coloring books, held a relative calm. The kids, exhausted from the day's play, slept peacefully. But this silence was deceptive, like thin ice on a frozen river. Silence before the storm. 3 children close in age that was both joy and an endless string of worries. After the birth of her youngest son, Emily never returned from maternity leave. First one got sick, then another. And now, for 3 years, she'd been trapped in this closed loop. Diapers, purees, playgrounds, bedtime stories. Jack worked, brought in money, but each month it seemed to dwindle. Urgent projects, delayed salaries. Emily tried not to escalate things. Understanding times were tough for everyone. But anxiety built like a snowball. They lived in her apartment, inherited from her grandmother. Before marriage, Emily felt like the owner here, independent and confident. She worked well, earned decently, traveled. Then, Jack appeared, the wedding, the kids. And now she was a housewife, living in the shadow of her husband and his parents. Jack's parents had temporarily moved in with them when Emily was in her final months of pregnancy with the 3rd child to help with the kids, to support the young family. Emily was grateful. But day by day, the help grew more intrusive. Her mother-in-law, Margaret Hayes, made it her duty to give advice on everything: how to feed, how to dress, how to raise them. Her father-in-law, Robert Hayes, controlled the family budget, criticizing Emily for being wasteful. Emily tried gently to defend her views, but she hit a wall of misunderstanding. "You're on maternity leave," Jack often repeated. "You're not working, so focus on the kids. We know better." Jack spent more and more time with his parents, discussing their own affairs. Emily felt like a stranger in her own home. She realized Jack was increasingly under his father's influence. Robert Hayes was a domineering man, used to controlling everything. He always believed he knew best how to live, and now he was actively helping Jack build their family life. That evening, Jack came home from work later than usual, tired but pleased. He pecked Emily on the cheek and headed to the kitchen, where his mother was already bustling. Emily felt a stab of jealousy. She wanted Jack to talk to her, ask how her day went, but he seemed not to notice her. After dinner, Jack sat at the computer. Emily watched him discreetly. He studied something intently on the screen, then frowned and started typing quickly. Suddenly, he jumped up and left the room, slamming the door loudly. Emily grew worried. She approached the computer and opened the browser history. Among sites with news and sports reviews, her eye caught an online banking page. Emily clicked it mechanically. It opened her personal account page. Emily froze. She couldn't believe her eyes. The balance was much lower than it should be. She frantically checked the statements. One after another, large transfers appeared all to the same account, Robert Hayes' account. Emily felt her breath catch. These were the savings for the children's future for their education, housing, emergencies. Money she'd scrimped and saved, denying herself everything. She rushed to Jack. He was in the living room with his father, animatedly discussing something. Seeing Emily, Jack fell silent and looked down guiltily. What does this mean? Emily barely contained her rage. She showed Jack the printout of the bank transactions. Where did you put the money? Jack was silent. Robert Hayes looked at Emily arrogantly. I took the money, Jack finally stammered. Dad had issues with the loan for the cabin. I decided to help. You decided to help? Emily couldn't believe her ears. You took our children's money and gave it to your father? Don't yell, Jack snapped. Why are you so upset? The cabin is for the family too. We'll vacation there. The cabin? You're thinking about a cabin when we have 3 kids? Emily was furious. Have you ever thought about them? About me? You're dramatizing, Robert Hayes interjected. Money comes and goes. Family is what matters. Family? Emily smiled bitterly. What family? You've taken everything from me. Money, freedom, self-confidence. You've turned me into a dependent housewife. Ungrateful, hissed Margaret Hayes, appearing in the doorway. We only wish you well. Well? Emily glared at her mother-in-law with hatred. You've ruined my life. You gave birth to them. So raise them, Jack said coldly, turning away. Those words were the final straw. Emily felt something break inside her. She could no longer endure, no longer stay silent, no longer live in this nightmare. She turned silently and left the room. Jack and his parents exchanged glances. They didn't understand what was happening. They were used to Emily always yielding, always agreeing. But this time, it was different. Emily had made a decision. A strange calm settled inside, contrasting the storm raging just yesterday. Silence became her weapon as she pondered every step. Jack, accustomed to her compliance, didn't notice the change. He kept droning on about his parents' loan, the cabin, how everything would work out. Emily half listened, gathering shards of her shattered faith in their shared future. The children needed protection, and she was going to provide it. In the morning, after Jack left for work, Emily resolutely dialed her mother's number. Susan Reynolds, hearing her daughter's trembling voice, immediately sensed something serious. Emily, barely holding back tears, told her about the missing money, the loan, the pressure from Jack's parents. Mom, I don't know what to do, Emily whispered, feeling small and helpless. Hang in there, sweetie, Susan Reynolds replied firmly. I'll come tomorrow. Don't say anything to Jack, just wait. The next day, early in the morning, the doorbell rang. Emily, having fed the kids breakfast, opened the door with a pounding heart. There stood Susan Reynolds, a tall, poised woman with a piercing gaze. In her hands was a thick folder. She looked composed and determined, like in her days as a notary. Hello, Emmy, Susan Reynolds said, hugging her daughter. Well, show me the battlefield. Entering the apartment, Susan Reynolds quickly assessed the situation. She saw the exhaustion in Emily's eyes, felt the tension in the air. Jack's parents, hearing the noise, came into the hallway. Robert Hayes, Jack's father, arrogantly eyed the guest. Susan Reynolds, what brings you here? He asked with feigned politeness. I came to help my daughter, Susan Reynolds replied curtly, ignoring his tone. We have things to discuss privately. Robert Hayes frowned but said nothing. He knew Susan Reynolds was a woman with backbone. With Emily, they went to her room. Susan Reynolds sat at the table and opened the folder. Inside were documents, statements, copies of certificates. Tell me everything in order, Susan Reynolds asked, putting on her glasses. Emily began speaking haltingly and hurriedly, but gradually calmed under her mother's attentive gaze. She told about the apartment, the account in the children's name, the pressure from Jack's parents, his irresponsibility. Susan Reynolds listened carefully, making notes in a notebook. Then she asked Emily to show the apartment documents and account statements. The apartment is in your name, Susan Reynolds stated, examining the ownership certificate. And the account too? That's good. It gives us options. What options, Mom? Emily asked hopefully. We can protect your interests and the children's, Susan Reynolds replied. Jack made a serious mistake, and he must answer for it. Susan Reynolds explained Emily's rights. She talked about the possibility of a prenup, filing for child support, evicting Jack's parents from the apartment. A prenup? Child support? But we're a family, Emily said, confused. Family, Emmy, is when people care for and respect each other, Susan Reynolds answered. Jack, unfortunately, acted irresponsibly and selfishly. We must protect you and the kids. Susan Reynolds pulled several sheets from the folder. This is a draft prenup, she explained. It states that all property acquired before marriage remains yours. This is a child support application. And this is an eviction lawsuit for Jack's parents. Read it all carefully and tell me what you think. Emily took the documents and began reading. The words seemed foreign and frightening. Prenup, child support, eviction. Had her life really come to this? I don't know, Mom, Emily whispered, setting the papers aside. I'm scared. I understand, sweetie, Susan Reynolds replied, hugging her. But you're not alone. I'm with you. We'll do everything right. Together, they discussed each point of the documents. Susan Reynolds patiently explained the legal nuances, helping Emily understand she had the right to protection and support. Most importantly, Susan Reynolds emphasized, open a separate bank account in your name and transfer all child benefits there. Jack shouldn't have access to that money. Emily nodded. She knew it was necessary. Susan Reynolds helped her draft the account application and explained how to transfer the funds. We'll handle it tomorrow, Susan Reynolds said. For now, rest. You need to gather strength. That evening, when Jack returned from work, Emily stayed silent. She prepared dinner, fed the kids, and went to her room. Jack tried to talk, but she answered monosyllabically and avoided his gaze. What's wrong? Jack asked, frowning. You're acting strange today. Nothing, Emily replied, turning to the window. Just tired. Jack shrugged and went to watch television with his parents. Emily heard their laughter and felt resentment and anger building in her heart. The next morning, while Jack was at work, Emily and Susan Reynolds went to the bank. They opened an account in Emily's name and transferred all child benefits there. Now Emily had her own financial safety net. She felt a bit more confident and stronger. Returning home, Emily saw Jack's parents in animated conversation. Robert Hayes, noticing Emily, looked at her arrogantly. Well, how's it going? He asked mockingly. Still sulking at Jack? Emily stayed silent. She didn't want to argue. Susan Reynolds, standing nearby, calmly replied, We're fine. Thanks for your concern. That evening, when Jack returned from work, Susan Reynolds pulled the folder from her bag and placed it on the table. Emily watched her mother, feeling both relief and anxiety. Jack sat on the couch, glued to his phone. The kids, as usual, noisily played with cars on the carpet. Jack, we need to talk, Susan Reynolds said calmly. Her voice, though soft, was firm and assured. Jack looked up from his phone, frowning. What now? Did I mess up again? He snapped, glancing at Emily. No, Jack, this concerns you, Susan Reynolds replied, gesturing for him to sit at the table. He rose reluctantly and sat opposite, eyeing Emily's mother suspiciously. Tension hung in the air, almost tangible. Emily settled the kids at the table, turning on cartoons to distract them somewhat from what was happening. Susan Reynolds placed the folder before Jack. This is an official notice, she said, without details. Jack, puzzled, opened it and scanned the papers. At first, he just furrowed his brows in confusion, but gradually his face shifted to bewilderment, then horror. The documents included copies of a child support application, a backdated prenup protecting Emily's interests, and an eviction notice for his parents. What does this mean? He croaked, lifting his gaze to Emily. It means you no longer have access to our children's money, which you so generously gave to your father, Emily replied. Her voice was even and calm, but her eyes brimmed with hurt and disappointment. It means I won't let you control my life or my children's future anymore. Jack tried to object, but Susan Reynolds interrupted. All documents comply with the law. The apartment belongs to Emily, and she has full rights to manage her property. The prenup protects her and the children's interests. As for your parents, Jack, they're living here without legal basis and must vacate by the deadline. You can't do this, Jack cried, turning to Emily. We're family. How can you do this to me? Family, Emily smirked. You only remember family now? When you secretly took money meant for our kids? Did you think of family? When you let your parents humiliate me and meddle in our lives? Did you think of family then? Jack paled. He realized the situation had spiraled out of control. He was used to Emily always yielding soft and compliant. But now, before him stood a different woman. Strong, self-assured, ready to fight for her and her children's future. I didn't know it was this serious, Jack muttered, trying to justify himself. I thought Dad would repay when he could. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You always say that, Jack," Emily replied wearily. "You always say you didn't mean to. But it only gets worse. I can't live like this anymore. I want my kids to grow up in a normal environment where they're loved and respected, not used as bargaining chips." Jack's parents, hearing the commotion, emerged from their room. Seeing the documents in Jack's hands and the tense faces of Emily and Susan Reynolds, they instantly grasped something was wrong. "What's going on here?" demanded Robert Hayes, Jack's father, in his authoritative tone. Susan Reynolds turned to him. "What's happening is what should have happened long ago," she replied. "Your son made a mistake, and now he'll pay for it. As for you, Robert Hayes, and you, Margaret Hayes," she shifted her gaze to Jack's mother, "you'll have to leave this apartment. You have time to pack." "You have no right to speak to us like that," Robert Hayes fumed. "We helped with the kids, supported you, and this is how you repay us?" "Helped?" Susan Reynolds smirked. "You interfered in our lives. You controlled every step, humiliated my daughter. Is that what you call help? As for support, I've seen nothing but criticism and dissatisfaction from you." Margaret Hayes tried to defend her husband, but Susan Reynolds cut her off with a gesture. "I'm not arguing with you. You have time to pack. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to go to court." Robert Hayes flushed with rage. He was used to everyone obeying him, always getting his way. But now he faced a woman unafraid, ready to stand up to him. Jack stood with his head bowed, silently listening to the argument. He felt crushed. He knew he was to blame. He'd succumbed to his parents' influence. He couldn't protect his wife and children. He'd made a mistake that might cost him his family. Please, give me a chance," he pleaded, turning to his wife. "I'll fix everything. I'll return the money. I'll apologize to your mom. I'll do whatever you say." Emily looked at him with a long, piercing stare. Her eyes held so much pain, disappointment, and fatigue that Jack felt terrified. He realized he'd lost her trust, and regaining it would be incredibly hard if possible at all. "I'll think about it," Emily replied, turning away. "But right now, I want you to leave. I don't want to see you." Jack, head down, left the room. He felt empty and lost. He knew he stood on the threshold of a new life, and what it became depended solely on him. Susan Reynolds hugged Emily's shoulders. "Don't worry, honey," she said. "Everything will be okay. You're strong, you'll manage. And I'll always be here to support you." Emily leaned into her mother, feeling tears well up. The next day, Emily filed for child support in court. She also started the process to evict Jack's parents. She was determined and wouldn't back down. Meanwhile, Robert Hayes and Margaret Hayes, Jack's parents, stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by their suitcases and boxes. Susan Reynolds, clad in her unchanging calm, watched from the doorway. Emily stood a bit apart, arms crossed, as if observing a performance. "How can you do this to our son?" Robert Hayes roared at Emily. "We always helped you, always supported you." "Supported?" Emily smirked. "You only supported yourselves and your son. My interests, my children's, they never mattered to you." Margaret Hayes tried to intervene, grabbing Emily's arm. "Emmy, think where will we go? We're old." Emily freed her arm. "You had somewhere to go before you made Jack give you my children's money. Now find another place." Susan Reynolds stepped forward. "Robert Hayes, Margaret Hayes, I understand it's not easy for you now, but the law is the law. You're living in my daughter's apartment without any basis. You must leave. Otherwise, we'll have to go to court." Robert Hayes snorted contemptuously. "Court? I have connections there. You'll regret messing with me." "I don't think so," Susan Reynolds replied calmly. "I have connections too. And believe me, I'm not afraid to use them." After those words, Jack's parents, muttering curses, began carrying out their things. Emily watched, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. She knew she was doing right by protecting herself and her children, but she pitied these elderly people in such a bind. Jack, like a shadow, watched from the hallway. He tried to say something, explain, but Emily turned away, unwilling to hear his excuses. She knew all his words were just empty promises meant to soften her anger. When Jack's parents finally carried out the last box, silence fell over the apartment. A heavy, oppressive silence, like the harbinger of a storm. Emily looked at Susan Reynolds, seeking support. Her mother hugged her, holding her close. "Everything will be fine, sweetie," she whispered. "You're strong, you'll get through this." Jack realized the situation was out of control. He could no longer influence events. All his attempts to persuade Emily, play on pity, or guilt-trip her yielded no results. She'd become a different person, a strong, confident woman ready to fight for her happiness and her children's well-being. That same evening, with the kids asleep, Emily gathered her courage and called Jack for a talk. She knew it would be tough, but it was necessary to set everything straight. "Jack," she began, striving to stay calm, "I want you to understand that it's over between us." Jack tried to object, but Emily stopped him with a hand. "I can't trust you anymore. You betrayed me, betrayed our children. You gave away our money to your parents, knowing we needed it. You put their interests above ours. I can't forgive that, but I meant well," Jack exclaimed. "I wanted to help my parents." "You wanted to please them, Jack," Emily replied. "You always put their opinion above mine. You never considered me, my feelings. I don't want to live like this anymore." Jack bowed his head. He knew Emily was right. He'd always tried to please his parents, even at his family's expense. He was weak, immature, unable to make independent decisions. "What can I do to make you forgive me?" he asked, looking at Emily hopefully. "Nothing," Emily answered. "Forgiveness is a long, complicated process, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forgive you. But I'm willing to give you a chance to prove you can change. A chance to become a real father to our children." Emily laid out her conditions. Jack had to start paying child support, see a therapist, and attend family counseling. He had to prove through actions that he was ready to change and take responsibility for his life. Jack agreed to everything. He knew it was his last chance. He was prepared to do whatever it took to regain Emily's trust and that of his children. A few days later, Jack moved out of the apartment. He rented a small room on the city's outskirts. He understood his life had changed forever, and he'd have to start from scratch. After Jack left, Emily focused on her children and her work. She strived to create a stable, happy environment for them. She knew many challenges lay ahead, but she was ready for them. All right, thanks for listening.